And welcome to Horseplayers Happy Hour at a new day and time here on Friday afternoon at 2. Peter Thomas Fornital still in the location I've been in for the last several of these, and that is Walt and Whitman Brewery and Cafe. I give the cafe short shrift sometimes when I come on these shows, but wonderful cafe upstairs, then down in the basement. If you want the other beverage, you've got, boom, you got perfect. We got the nice Helles. Their new Oktoberfest is out. It's delicious. Very happy to still be up here in Saratoga, and extremely happy to be joined by my friend. You know him from his own eponymous podcast, also the work he does on NBC. He'll be back on there Saturday and Sunday this weekend. TV's Matt Bernier. What's up, Matt?
PTF, how are you? All is good up here. And I'm sure it's probably similar for you upstate New York right now. Finally feeling like fall. Sweater weather, long pants. I think the high today here is about 59. Looks like it's going to be that way right through Monday. We get a little bit of a reprieve beginning next week where I think it goes back up into the low mid 70s. But unfortunately, for someone who I look at fall, as nice as fall is in New England, it means that winter's on the other side. And I'm not a fan of winter. There's a lot of things I like to do that aren't conducive to snow and ice and all that crap. So I look at fall a little bit with a little bittersweet. Summer is my end all be all, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, it's part of the deal when you live in these sort of states.
No doubt about it. And the good news is fall means we are on our way to the Breeders' Cup. Going to be talking a lot this show about the Breeders' Cup win and your in races happening up at Toronto this weekend at beautiful Woodbine Racecourse. But I do want to put out a call because this is the first show in a few weeks where we've been on that somebody just stumbling upon us has an opportunity to play in this game happening right now over at horseplayers.com. It's our Horseplayers Happy Hour Breeders' Cup betting challenge feeder to Saturday's qualifier. You can get in, as you can see right there, you can get in real cheap. And the great news is the entire rake for this contest goes to charity. We've been splitting it amongst the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation's two key charities involved in the rehoming of racehorses after their racing days are done. So even if you're watching now, maybe you haven't handicapped this six-pack of races about to happen at Belmont Park. It doesn't matter. Go in there, play all the ones, play all the twos, pick your favorite number, and play all of that because it's going to such a good cause. Normally, we're on air for the end. In this case, I'll do a little bit of tweeting later tonight as to the results of this event. We won't be around to deliver that to you live on air, but we do want you to participate. And if it's too late, if you're watching the replay, we've been doing this every week, so we haven't discussed yet if next week is going to be a Thursday or Friday. We'll figure it all out, but there's going to be a Horseplayers Happy Hour every week, at least between now and the Breeders' Cup. Get involved, have fun, support a great cause. Matt has had some success in these events, and in fact, it wasn't in one of our games, but during one of these shows, punched his ticket for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. Join him and some of the country's best horse players. Fantastic opportunity. You can buy in for $10,000, but why buy in for $10,000 when you can start your path there and win in for $20? It's truly, in my mind, the greatest contest out there, the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, and we're always pushing people to go there. Matt, I do want to get your thoughts very quickly on this race at Belmont coming up. We've got race number 3 about to go, and they're starting to load. So if you want to give us a quick thought, it would be appreciated.
Yeah, they're loading in. I went with the 4 Hetty G in here going out for Wesley Ward. I thought that most recent start was better than maybe it looks on paper. I actually wrote about her for Racing Picks this week, and I just feel like you draw a line through the run 2 starts back. I think she fits in here quite well, and honestly, she's a better price than I thought she would be. Now, we'll see what happens with this final flash of money. Oh, and one part of the entry just broke through the gate.
Ooh,
so we are going to have a little bit of a delay here. Gives us more time to talk about the race.
Yeah, I was wildly uncreative, liking the entry in this spot. So I'm happy that you have something a little bit more creative. Talk us through your thought process on this one a little bit more.
Well, in the just sort of the logic was from a trip standpoint, I think she's going to work out a pretty solid one. I don't think she's the kind of horse that's going to be actually up there on the engine, but she has enough sort of tactical speed where she's not going to have to come from 100 out of it. For me, I'm always a little bit. I approach opening day anywhere with a little bit of at arm's length, just simply because I don't know what the track is doing. A million different things going on. We haven't been at Belmont Park in about 2 months at this point. So first time back, I just kind of want to get an idea of how things are going before you go full blown into the deep end. But I just like the sort of versatility and the tactical speed that this mare has, or filly. She's only 4. And I thought she could work out a decent trip in a spot like this.
Contests are a fantastic betting vehicle for an opening day like the one we're looking at, because you can get a full day of action for very little money. They are popped at Belmont. The one that broke through the gate was number 1A, Ruvies in Time. Do you get as unhappy as I do when you see that happen to one of your runners? Not that it's bad or deleterious for the horse to participate, but you just got to figure they then go on a little bit distracted, and it's not necessarily what I want to be looking at in a horse I've bet money on.
Well, to be honest, I mean, when it happens to me, I cancel the wager if I can. For better or for worse. If the horse ends up running and winning, great. I'll look at it and say that's fine. But I think when all the numbers sort of weigh out, more often than not, it's typically not a positive sign when the horse breaks through the gate. It seems like, I don't want to say you're going to lose your race before you even run it, but obviously it's not an experience that horses want to have to deal with before the race starts. So typically I cancel my wager. I like where I am right now, though, turning for home.
Yes, you just got to hope that Hetty G can continue to finish this race. Well, the beginning certainly has you where you want to be. We have seen some horses close in the lane here. Yeah, I think you're going to stay on and hold, though, barring anything crazy happening here. Looks like this one is going to come 4-1-2. And as predicted, not much from the one that ran through the gate, who ends up basically eased in this spot. And let me ask you this. In those situations where you've canceled those wagers, can you even remember one time where you regretted it? Have you had them come back and win on you?
Who was it? It was one of Chad's fillies last year at Saratoga. Maybe you'll remember who I'm referring to, or someone watching can tweet or mention in the comments. I can't remember who it was, but she popped her face on the gate before the gates opened. She never really got out, but I immediately said, throw her out. I don't want her. And she still was able to end up winning the race. I can't remember who it was offhand, but I put it this way, that I'm having a difficult time remembering that one instance. And that's really about it. I typically just try to run for the hills whenever that sort of thing happens again, for better or for worse. I'll sort of tip my cap and say, if a horse does that and still wins, they were either that much better than the field or the field was that bad, because it seems like more often than not, I mean, think about it with anything else, with any other kind of an athlete before the game, you know, everybody's already kind of jacked up and ready to go. But let's say all of a sudden there's a bit of a delay and it's because you fell down or whatever it is. I'm making up some ridiculous sort of scenario, but that's more or less what we're dealing with here with the horses. So for me, it's usually a universal sort of pass. But again, and if somebody can remember who I'm talking about, that would be greatly appreciated. But I feel like Chad's horse at Saratoga was the only one I can remember that happening to and it working out.
DJ Unstable will happily filter that comment if it comes in, if you can think of the Chad Brown runner that began to pop the gate. And I think that's a good point you make about, you don't always even just have to go all the way through the gate to have it have sort of a distracting effect. Even just popping the nose against the gate, it could just, you know, there's a big mental aspect to racing that doesn't often get talked about, and things that are going to distract the mind of a horse from the business at hand, typically not good ones. But in this case, it doesn't matter. You had the winner anyway, and this continues a fantastic run of form for you. You mentioned the work you've been doing over at racingpicks.com. Obviously, we've been doing some work with them on the network as well. Let folks know what do you have coming up on the site? How often are you posting your thoughts over there? What kinds of stuff are you doing?
Free content on racingpicks.com. All you need to do is enter your email address. There's no purchase necessary. No, none of that. I'm there Wednesday through Sunday, 4 days. It's written Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Saturday. Typically, it's a short little video with a few different selections. They can be stakes races. They can be low-level claimers. It can be a little bit of anything, a bit of a grab bag. And it's basically from anywhere in the country as well. So you get a little bit of everything mixed in there. Luckily, you know, it's always nice. And I know, Pete, you've been back in with the public handicapping selections sort of side of things. And it's always nice when you can get the first one out of the way. And you don't really have to think about it. You have to sweat out going goose egg. And I mean, I think the timing was unfortunate when I first hooked up with the folks at Racing Picks. It was in the midst of just that epic cold spell that I was in. And every day it felt like if I said the sky was blue, somebody would have come back and said, no, it's actually green. And they would have been right. Where there was no way that I could have cooked up a scenario where certain things played out the way that they did. But like everything else, I feel like everything sort of levels out and comes back to whatever the mean is. And luckily enough, the past, I'll probably say the past 5-6 weeks have been pretty good. And it's nice today. This is going to sound like a full-blown red board. I mean, I'm surprised that this filly went off at 4.5 to 1. I thought she was going to vie for favoritism.
I did not have listed in my top 3 picks. I absolutely whiffed on Hetty G. I'm glad that you had it. And that's a great point about runs of form and where you are in your, professionally and what you're doing at a given time. Your bankroll challenge that you tried a little bit earlier in the year, a little bit different if you've done it in the last few weeks. I've got to imagine that thought has flashed across your mind once or twice.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it ended up. The cold spell started once I began that little exercise, because I don't even feel like I got any sort of, I don't want to say fulfillment, because it was nothing more than sort of just that, like an exercise and an experiment to see how everything would shake down. But it was almost as if it never even had a chance to start, where, you're going to get into a hole, but you assume you're going to have some sort of luck to bring yourself out of it. And it felt like anything I touched turned to complete garbage. And there was just nothing I could figure out. I couldn't make heads or tails of anything. So I said it when I stopped doing it. I'm sure at some point I will give it another try. Maybe that'll be a nice sort of winter piece when we go back down to Gulfstream for the championship meet, post Breeders' Cup, post Triple Crown this year, and things like that. But I mean, it's one of those things where I know it's nothing more than, just an aberration. That's not the reality of the situation. But boy, it's tough to dig yourself out of those sort of holes when you start that poorly.
Well, I said it at the time. As a student of past performances myself, I had no doubt that you were going to get back on the right track. It was just a question if it was going to happen during the term of that particular experiment. And I love your idea of it as a winter project and something that folks enjoy following along. But let's try to take some, see if you can pass a little bit of wisdom along. Everybody watching this right now has gone through cold spells like that. Professional player friends have described to me the pains that they can go through at times. It's the nature of the game. It can be very, very difficult. It is very difficult. It can be punishing at times. Was there any particular piece of advice you have about what got you out of it? Anything you did in terms of your actual handicapping or wagering or mental exercises, breathing exercises, whatever you got? I'm sure people out there would want to hear how you started turning things around.
I mean, it was, I'm not going to lie to you, that was one of the rougher stretches that I've had since I've been involved with anything publicly, whether it was even the Horseplayers show, the reality show, or early on with the racing form or whatever it may be. That was about as dark as it got from a work standpoint, because I really felt like I couldn't, it was as if I was reading a foreign language and I had no idea what I was doing. And I had to kind of revert back to, I think it was one of the things that we chatted about early on when we first started these Horseplayer Happy Hours back early COVID quarantine lockdown setup. You just kind of have to go back to the staples, the old, tried and true pieces of handicapping. Don't try to, you don't need to try to turn 10 cents into $10 million. Just try to turn $1 into another $1 and look at it as simple as say, who's the speed? Who's the classiest in the field? Did the horse who may have got away with a really nice setup in the most recent run, was that against lesser and now we're stepping up in company? So maybe that's going to compromise this horse's chances a little bit. Take a look at the trainers and things like that. Profile of the racetrack. How is it playing? Who is it well suited to? Who is it conversely not going to be in their advantage? Just sort of the basics. Get back to the bare bones if you are going through those sort of things, because I can't imagine that I'm alone. And then I had a stretch where in the midst of that cold spell, I started looking at things just saying like, well, maybe I just need to start taking random stabs, because maybe it'll just be something ridiculous that'll happen to turn the luck around. It didn't. It ended up just being sort of a slow slog, and eventually, we righted the ship. And it was a very difficult time though mentally on me, because I think it's like that with anyone if you play long enough and you go through these sort of spells. But I do feel like, and again, I don't want it to be a woe is me or a woe is us in sort of the public forum, but it's difficult to sit there and continue to just say, trust me, It's going to turn around. It's going to turn around. Well, why should I continue to trust you? You need to bank on what you were saying, that, past performances would suggest this is nothing more than just a blip on the radar. But it's difficult for me to sit there with a straight face in the midst of an 0 for 30 run and be like, trust me, it's going to turn around. You know what I mean?
You're living proof that by sticking with it and by getting back to the basics, you can turn things around. I mean, this has been incredible. The work you've done on these shows. Obviously, I'm sure you're never going to tire talking about what happened in this year's Kentucky Oaks. So let that be a lesson to people out there, that if you stick with it and if you go back to the basics, you can turn things around. I mean, as horse players, this is something we all have to deal with, the vagaries of this business and how difficult and frustrating it can be. And it's just great. It's great to see you flying at the moment. So very excited. We'll get back to you for an opinion on the next race at Belmont. We'll also be talking a little bit later in the show about these 3 win and you're in races. Right now, though, I have a very pressing matter. What I did not realize is my the battery on this laptop I'm using is emptying out like a sub that's been hit. So I'll stick with you guys, but I'm gonna move just to get closer to the power outlet, so we don't have a repeat of a couple of weeks ago, Matt, when I was having tech issues and I basically left you to have to deal with a runaway guest all your own. So this will be. I'll let you vamp for a minute while I take 30 seconds to get plugged in before you lose me completely.
Oh, this actually might be a good opportunity if producer Craig is back there. Maybe we can take a look and see if we have an updated leaderboard after the first leg of this contest. And there we are. Perfect timing. The top 6 finishers in this afternoon's contest will win a 179 entry into tomorrow's BC qualifier. The top 2 non-winners, so 7th and 8th place, you will get $40 in breakage returned. The next 3 beyond that, so 9, 10, and 11, you will get your $20 entry back. And again, as we made it clear at the top, it's part of the reason I'm a little bit embarrassed. You can see my name there, and it's all 4s. I had only had time to go through a couple of races knowing what was coming this weekend for me work-wise. So I said I liked Teddy G in the first, so let's roll with the 4s. And here we are. Let's hope the 4s end up prevailing here. There are 14 of us who had the 4 to start things off. So a little more than what we're dealing with as far as the ultimate payout levels are concerned. But the most important number to keep in mind is the top 6. Those 6 entries will lock themselves into a position tomorrow afternoon for $179 buy-in for a live BC qualifier. And I think, Pete, something else that I would at least urge folks to consider if you are one of the folks that qualifies for tomorrow's contest, specifically the $179 live event. There are a few other BC qualifiers happening tomorrow on horseplayers.com, but they're not of the same format. If you win your way in here for 20, I would strongly encourage you to buy another entry and try to play them off one another and effectively look at it as if you have 2 for $199, because you won your way in here for 20 and you can pick up that other one for $179 and go at it that way, because I do think there is a tremendous advantage in these live formats to having 2 entries as opposed to 1. You can look at it and say whether you want to play prices on one of them versus the other. However you want to approach it, I would strongly encourage folks, especially if you are still in search of the actual BC buy-in, the $10,000 entry, I would strongly encourage you to go and think about going forward, buying another entry tomorrow afternoon if you are one of the folks that gets in here for cheap. If you're someone who already has your $10,000 buy-in and you want to just roll the dice with your 1 entry, honestly, that's probably what I would do if I am in that position, lucky enough to get through. But I would encourage folks, if you are still trying to find your way in, buy that extra $179 entry tomorrow. Have 2 for the price of effectively $200.
I think that's a great idea. You talked about the multiple entry strategy, the 2 main formats or the 2 main models. It feels like people want to do with that. Either you have your sort of long shot and your favorite, your good, your quote unquote good entry and your bad entry. Sometimes they'll end up being referred as, where you catch the price on one, maybe you can be a little bit more logical on that one, and then your other entry you can reach for the longer prices. Of course, that can lead to split ticket hell, as it's known.
Yeah.
The way that I think I prefer, generally speaking, with 2 entries is you almost treat it like it's a multi-race wager, a horizontal bet, where you double up where you have your strong opinions, your sort of singles, your A horses, if you will. And then if you have open races where you don't like favorites and, maybe you can't settle on just one horse that's a strong opinion, but you have a chance to spread around when your opinion isn't as strong. It just depends on your wagering personality and how you want to do it. But obviously, it greatly impacts your chances of success when you get that extra bite at the apple. So I'll second that idea. And we do the Horseplayers Happy Hour feeder, but there's loads of feeders all over horseplayers.com or over at the sister site, horsejourneys.com, and lots of ways to get involved. I'm a it depends on your wagering personality, of course, but I'm a huge proponent in contests as a way, like I'm an action player, and I get like to a fault, and I will often not in my cash betting delineate enough between just a bet that I want to make to have a bet and a bet when I have a really strong opinion. One great thing for me about contests is they give you a route in every race for a fixed cost, so you can do that, and then for me, what I like to do is just try to keep my hand out of my pocket in cash betting, except when I really mean it, and then bet a whole lot more because I haven't frittered away money where I don't have the strong opinion. So there are great ways to get action, and also, they help make you a better horse player, and then of course, they greatly increase the amount of money you're churning and help the industry when you win into events like the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. So all stuff to keep in mind. I know Matt and I are both big proponents of contests, but it's always useful to go ahead and explain a little bit of the why of that as well along the way here. What do you say, Matt? We turn our attention to some of these Breeders' Cup win and you're in races this weekend. I assume you're all studied up and ready to chat. Shall we start on Saturday with the Woodbine Mile, one of my favorite races of the year, and one that I'm slightly stressed not to be able to be there in person for this year?
Yeah, let's dive into it. I think all of the Grade 1 win and you're in action at Woodbine this weekend is spectacular for different reasons. I mean, the Woodbine Mile is always one of the most exciting races of the year, just given it's a little bit of a unique circumstance and setup with the long stretch. It's a one-turn mile. And then you go to Sunday, it's sort of the what could potentially be going down the road, not just for this year with the juvenile horses, but down the road next year, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, as far as the summer and then the Talma are concerned. So plenty of great racing, and I will start wherever you would like to.
Let's move the conversation to this year's Grade 1 Woodbine Mile. 3-year-olds and up, and we do have a 3-year-old to talk about this year, going 1 mile on the Woodbine turf. And we have some crazy noise interference coming in there, but it was just for a second, and it sounds like everything's okay. But I'm very excited about this race because I believe there's a few narratives that are going to get a lot of play in here that are going to create some value on horses that I'm interested in. I think I'll start the question. I'll ask you the same thing I asked Jeff Bratt earlier when we talked about this on the RacingPicks.com Players Podcast. Does Mark Casse win this year's Woodbine Mile?
Yes, flat out. Yes, flat out. And not with the horse that I think most people are going to go with.
Well, we'll loop back to that. Let's take a look at where I think some of the value in this race is going to come from. And it's not that I don't like either of these horses. I'm huge fans of both of them, but I just think it's a little bit of a tricky situation for both the 3 Cheryl's Spite and the 4 Starship Jubilee. Let's start with Cheryl's Spite, a horse who I've been a huge fan of both of the outings and been extremely excited to see what this one's going to do. Was briefly pointed to the Kentucky Derby and a little bit of a setback ruled Cheryl's Spite out of that race. I can't help but think they just would have sent, and we might have seen a very different result of the race had they decided to go there. But interestingly, Cheryl's Spite somehow manages to find a spot basically just as ambitious as the Kentucky Derby in this year's Woodbine Mile. What have you thought of? Have you been impressed with this one? You're a tape watcher. I felt like the tape of this one, especially the gallop outs, has been awesome. And this is a horse I would be so excited to be looking at in the right spot. I can't say that I think this is the right spot for me to get excited about betting, though.
I think visually he's been spectacular. I really do. And to your point, the gallop outs, especially in that most recent start in the Marine, keep in mind that was at a mile and 16th, but it was his first time going 2 turns. And he galloped out about a half mile in front of the field. It almost looked like the rider couldn't get him to stop running. He just continued on with it. And that's even more impressive to me, considering I thought early on in the run he was a little bit keen, a little bit eager. He wanted to go. This is a horse who I think is still figuring things out. And to your point, the Derby would have been an ambitious placement. This is, say what you will about this field as a whole. Maybe some people don't think it's littered with superstars. This is a really good field. Good older horses in here. I wouldn't be surprised if one or a few of them end up figuring come Breeders' Cup Mile time. He's the kind of horse that, to me, he's the most exciting runner in the field. He's arguably, in my opinion, if he goes the way I think he's going to, I think he's going to be the underlay of the race because he has so much to prove against this caliber of runner. Keep in mind, I get it. He broke his maiden at 7/8 on the turf, but it was off of a rather tepid pace. And again, against maidens, he's going to have to go a one-turn mile against legitimately proven turf milers. I think this is a little bit too much to ask. Having said that, if he passes this test, not only are we probably dealing with a fascinating prospect come Breeders' Cup time, you might be dealing with a proper superstar.
Yeah, I would say he might be a future champion somewhere along the line if he can pull this test off. You make the point about the underlay of the race. It's interesting. I spoke with Ernie Perry. We did the full card look at Woodbine over on InTheMoneyPodcast.com. We had Doug McPherson and Ernie giving their thoughts on all the races. Ernie, clocker at Woodbine, also makes the line. And I think he really struggled with this one, not knowing what the crowd was going to do. Bookmakers in England have installed Cheryl Spite at 5-1. Ernie went 8-1. I mean, I'd need double digits to even think about it, given the difficulty of the test. My gut is that the bookies might be more in tune with what the public are going to do here just because of the story. But then again, it's tricky because there's a lot of horses who have to take money in here. If you were to guess at the price of Cheryl Spite, what would you guess?
Yeah, my initial thought was 4 or 4.5 to 1, simply because I feel like this is sort of the epitome of the hype train, where this is a horse who, and rightfully so, I mean, this is a horse who has done nothing wrong in the racetrack, but for all the reasons that you and I have laid out, there are so many obstacles for this one to have to overcome to win in a spot like this. And to your point, the probability of him doing that, I don't think will warrant even if he does go off at 5-1, which I think is reasonable. Does he really deserve to be a 18-20% kind of horse? I don't believe that in a spot like this. I think he should be closer to what you were laying out, sort of the 8-10-12-1 range, and he's just not going to be that price. Yeah,
and even that I'd call just the price. Let's talk about Starship Jubilee. What a great runner she's been. You don't amass a wins to starts mark like that without having the heart of a lioness. Has some legitimate looking form, especially, who knows what's left of Sister Charlie, but still pretty impressive to beat that one back in the Boston Spa. I just feel like, we're dealing with she's so good, but I feel like this is maybe a bridge too far. A grade 1 against males. I'm not sure I'm seeing enough in her form to think that she's going to be able to do this. Another that I'd need double digits to even consider, who will surely be a skinny single-digit price. I love her. I'd love to be wrong. I'd cheer for her the whole way, even at the expense of my own betting bank. But I mean, I can see the Cheryl Spite case, I think, a little bit more than I can see the Starship Jubilee case. Where do you stand as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, I feel like if I were making the morning line, I would have probably flipped the numbers on Starship Jubilee and Cheryl Spite. I feel like Starship Jubilee ends up in that 6-7 to 1 range. She's the one, to me, of all the big horses in here, who probably goes a little bit on the float going up from her morning line. You can make an argument that she's actually getting class relief, given the field that she ran against in that Diana. Rushing Fall, who's going to be the favorite for the filly and mare turf. Mean Mary, who will probably be the second choice, or one of anyway. And that's assuming they don't do anything else crazy, and I say crazy in the best way possible, try to take on males going longer. Another story for another day. Sister Charlie, you even brought up her. I mean, this is a horse who she's won at Keeneland in the past. She's won a Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf in the past. And also, given the way the Diana was run, I don't think Starship Jubilee had any real chance. It was very, very slow pace signed on that day. The top two runners, they went 1-2 the entire way around. So I think that race is probably better than it looks at on paper. But to your point, I don't know that she's necessarily this caliber. And I don't mean that as a slight, because we're dealing with, I think, some really crack milers. There's a part of me that wonders if this is a little bit too much for him.
Yeah, I think that's well put and very fair. Another to talk about before we get into your selection, the 7 value proposition. This is a runner who has plenty of upside, very lightly raced, progressive type. I'm not sure today is going to be the day for this one to succeed at this level, but I surely wouldn't fall out of my chair if it, stop me if you've heard this one. Chad Brown having grade 1 turf success. I was just thinking the Chad Brown factor was another reason why this one might be a little bit shorter in odds than I would make him if I were making my own value line.
Yeah, this is a kind of horse where if I'm wrong about him, I'll throw my hands up and say good on whoever had him. There's nothing that I've ever seen from him that I've loved. I think he's a fine horse. Clearly, he's a fast horse. He's not overly fast, but he's a fast horse. I thought the poker as a whole, I didn't love that race. I've had a number of horses come out of that race to run decent figures, but the finishes haven't been spectacular. I thought he had no real excuse to finish where he did in that most recent run, with the exception of the fact that despite the slow fractions early, it felt like it was a race that had a bit of a closer's flow with Seismic Wave and Social Paranoia coming from the back of the pack. Again, if Chad were to win a grade 1 on turf, I would not be surprised at all. I just have never loved this horse, and I don't really see a price that would entice me otherwise.
In other news, tomorrow is Saturday, that kind of thing. Let's move on to these Cassie runners. I've gone back and forth on them. In the end, I'm going to go with number 8, War of Will, in this spot. I think he's going to just pull an absolutely great trip. I think Cheryl Spite is going to go to the lead. We saw the workout where they tried rating tactics. They didn't work out so well. The news that Admiralty Pier is going to go here and not earlier in the card in the Singspiel. I think those two are bound to be out there together on the front end, with War of Will just getting the perfect lead into the race. I think he showed last time in the Maker's Mark Mile that he can do the old stalk and pound strip. I think he's going to be able to get a jump on March to the Arch and all the rest. Now, granted, he's always been a good workhorse, even when he was throwing in duds on the dirt last year. But I like the fact that he's been laid out for this. This has been the stated plan since the Maker's Mark Mile, and he's been working well, and I think he gets a better trip. Look, in my horizontals, I'm not going to stand alone, but I am going to press War of Will and make him my top pick. Now, you tipped your hand which way you were going, but I don't know. As hot as you've been in getting some prices, which is the Cassie you're interested in? Is it number 1, March to the Arch, or are you going hog wild with the 5 Olympic runner?
No, I'm going down to the inside with March to the Arch. I made him my play of the day in the Racing Picks video for Saturday. Well, first let's start with War of Will. He's a horse that I have loved since he was a 2-year-old. I loved him as a 3-year-old, even now as a 4-year-old. I still think he's an incredibly talented horse, probably a horse that doesn't get the credit he deserves. I feel like for a minute there, he kind of became a punchline, which I didn't think was entirely fair. I thought some circumstances went against him, and say what you will, I think people held the Preakness dream trip up the wood against him, which I don't think that's fair, but that's neither here nor there. The reason I'm against War of Will here this afternoon, it's twofold. You brought up that this has been the plan all along, to come back in this spot fresh. I can't help but think this is a means to an end to get him ready for the Breeders' Cup back at Keeneland, where he won that Maker's Mark Mile back in July. So to me, there's a part of me that thinks the Connections will be very, very thrilled if he's in with a chance in deep stretch. That long Woodbine stretch ends up getting to him. He gets a little tired at the end, but you think you're going to have him on tilt, ready to go that first Saturday in November. The other piece for me, going back to that Maker's Mark Mile, I said it at the time, and I know some people kind of rolled their eyes when I mentioned it. I didn't like the race. I didn't think it was a very good race, and based on the form coming out of it, I have no reason to believe that my first assessment was wrong. You've had a number of solid speed figures earned coming out of the race, but none of them have done anything spectacular. You've had a number of 4th, 5th place finishes, a number of low to mid 90 buyers. I'm just going to be against that race until proven otherwise. Maybe he will be the one to start kind of changing that trend. Now, as far as March to the Arch is concerned, he's been a horse to me. The talent has always been there, but he's never been the hardiest, let's say. There have been instances where either he's had a bad trip or maybe he's lost races I don't think he should have lost. I don't know what it was. I shouldn't say that. I have an idea of what it was. I've never seen that killer instinct from him that he showed in the King Eddie in that most recent start. And I recognize he had a very clean trip throughout, down on the inside, saved every inch of ground. But I can't help but notice he's 2 for 2 over the turf at Woodbine. And this most recent run was the first time in his 23 race career he's been allowed to go a 1-turn mile. And if you believe the incremental fractions in a product like DRF Formulator, he got his final 3 quarters in 22:33, 22:50, and 22:60. I mean, any one of those final quarters would be legitimate for a turf runner at a mile. He did it for 3 consecutive quarters. I think the pace sets up for him in here. The way that he leveled off and finished down the lane, I think there's a chance that he finally just sort of the light bulb was on, and that's what he's wanted all along, this 1-turn mile at Woodbine. I love March to the Arch tomorrow.
I want him all over my tickets as well, just that slight preference for War of Will. But you make a great case. Good stuff, Matt, on the Breeders' Cup Mile. Very quickly, as they're loading at Belmont, we know in the contest you played the 4. I played the 1, You're to Blame. Did you have? What was your actual handicapping opinion here as they just popped from the gate?
Well, so when I went through the race, because again, for the selections for racing picks, I kind of go through all the different cards, trying to find some things that were interesting to me. I had a hard time making heads or tails of this race simply from a pace standpoint where, these long distance races we talk about, speed is actually much more to your advantage than it is even in the shorter races. But I had a hard time trying to figure out who was actually going to hit the top in here. I guess based on that, I'm always going to default to the horses that have proven themselves at these longer distances. And while I didn't pick him as far as any analysis is concerned, Rocketry, say what you will. Maybe he's trending off form. Maybe he's just getting a little long in the tooth. He's a horse who has always really done well at these longer distance races. So when my little 4 theory came up, I said, well, you know what? I could do worse than have Rocketry in here at 1.5 miles.
I thought You're to Blame might be on the lead. Is in a forward position about 2 lengths off our pace setter, Tough Customer in Danny, California, a horse who certainly stuffed me in a locker before. Betting market did make Rocketry a significant 6-5 favorite. He's getting a fine trip back there in 4th as You're to Blame at 8-5 is now making a move. Splitting Horses making a move towards the lead, and Danny, California. I just thought at the pace call, You're to Blame would be ahead of Rocketry. This was a situation where I would have used those 2 and only those 2 in picks, but the potential pace advantage and what I figured to be a longer price set me in the You're to Blame direction. They're on the turn now. We're going to see what happens in a minute. This Danny, California is a tough customer, and like I said, it wouldn't be the first time I underestimated him if he can hang on. Looks like Rocketry's under a lot of pressure, but he is finding. So we'll see what happens here as they get into this Belmont stretch for this marathon distance.
Yeah, and the trip, I would imagine you've got to be very, very thrilled with the way that the trip unfolded for your horse, and we'll just find out if he's good enough. Manny's looking around rather confidently. It's either confidence or he's afraid that he's going to drop anchor here.
No,
one of the two.
I mean, I've never seen him look back that many times. That's a little bit crazy. I think he's going to empty out, and I think You're to Blame is going to pass him here. But it wouldn't surprise me. These Orlando Nota runners have been finding in the lane
again,
and this one is doing just that. Unbelievable. Maybe Manny was trying to decide how much he had. He's going to hold off You're to Blame and all the rest. Apparently, it's not just Saratoga where Orlando Nota and the Nota brothers can succeed. And like I said, I've had this feeling before of being stuffed into a locker by Danny, California. This horse is a tough customer and a very cool horse. And congrats to him and his connections. I had no excuses. You're to Blame was meant to go by, and I don't know what happened. We didn't see the good Rocketry today, though. I think that's safe to say.
And I suppose, kind of what we talked about at the top, maybe we're just looking at a case where he's just trending off form. I mean, we haven't seen really one of his best races for the better part of a year and a half now at this point. So maybe we're just getting a little bit long in the tooth. Obviously, a pace situation like that is not going to be conducive to a horse trying to rally from that far off of it. But I don't know that I want to just use that as the excuse and run away from it. I want to say maybe he's not quite what he once was.
I think that seems like a logical conclusion based on the way things went down there. Let's get back to Woodbine, my friend, and talk about some more win and you're in action this weekend. Let's do a little update on the coverage you're going to be providing for NBC. Do you know what hours you're going to be on? We'll go back to look at Saturday first for the Woodbine Mile, and then we'll look ahead to this Sunday card with the 2 grade ones. Where can folks find you?
Saturday, 5 to 6 Eastern, NBCSN in conjunction with the folks at TVG. And then on Sunday, we'll be on from 4 to 6, all the same lot over on NBCSN. So we'll have the Grade 1 Woodbine Mile. We'll have the 2 Grade 1 races, the Win and Your Ins on Sunday afternoon, the summer, and then the Talma for the boys and the girls. So a lot of great racing Saturday and Sunday from north of the border up in Mississauga.
No doubt about it. Mississauga. That's right. I always want to say Toronto, but that's
right next door.
It is. I really do miss going up there this year, and I can't wait. Hopefully, hopefully well before this time next year, but at the very least by this time next year, can be back up there. It's such a great time of year in that city. The last 4 years, the weather's been unbelievable, and there's just so much going on. If you like to eat and drink, Toronto, a fantastic city for all that stuff, and then culturally too, the Toronto International Film Festival typically ends this weekend. So if you can get up a few days early, especially to not smush yourself on top of the racing too much, check out some great movies. And then these 2 days of racing, fantastic. The Saturday card is loaded, but they actually have these 2 Grade 1s on Sunday. And the first Grade 1 on Sunday we're going to talk about is the summer. We've got 2-year-olds going a mile on the turf. And this is an interesting race. We have a cross entry here. Have you heard, I'll start with this question. Have you heard where Ready to Repeat is likely to go? Is he going to go in the sprint race, or is he going to show up here? Because that's certainly going to be a big factor at the very least in terms of pace.
The only thing I know for certain at this moment is that there hasn't been a decision made that we've been made aware of. I was just on a production call just not too long ago. And at that point, anyway, there hadn't been a confirmed placement one way or the other. So it's still anybody's guess. I'm going to approach the races if the horse is going to run, knowing that there's a chance that come Sunday afternoon, he's not running in this spot.
I mean, I do think from a pace point of view, Timeform US would have Ready to Repeat clear. If Ready to Repeat is not in here, Gretzky the Great suddenly gets clear. But I was wondering, I mean, the more I look at this race, I think we might have an opportunity to bet on a horse who's not theoretically the fastest, who might be a little bit more suited to the testing one-turn mile. Where did you end up going in here?
I think, and I could be wrong, maybe I've missed it between Alabama Saturday and now. I think American Pharoah gets his first Grade 1 winner in this race. I think the number 5 American Monarch, I just thought the debut was everything that I would want from a first-time starter going 2 turns, coming out of a barn like Bill Mott's. Professionalism, sat off of the pace, went and ran down a good horse that Chad Brownhouse, who actually happens to be in this race as well, in Secret Potion. I just thought everything about the race was really well. I thought it was a nice professional effort. I have no reason to believe the horse won't improve. I know people have drawn I don't want to say the comparisons, but you don't have to go that far back where Mott had a horse who did very well up at Saratoga going 2 turns, sent him up here to win this race. That was Good Samaritan. Yep. I don't want to, again, Good Samaritan was a really talented racehorse. I don't want to just immediately put that on a horse like American Monarch who's run 1 time, but I was quite taken by the performance. And oddly enough, he gets a little bit of a turn back from a mile and a 16th, 2 turns to the 1-turn mile. I'm going to go with the 5 American Monarch.
We see it the same way. I felt like that was an extremely useful debut in the patient hands of Bill Mott, not known for winning first out. I feel like this one has to go better this time around. And on figures, we'll need to, but especially if we do get Ready to Repeat in here. But even without Ready to Repeat in here, I feel like American Monarch will be close enough, and the way this configuration plays out will have the ability to make the run in the lane, should step up. And I love that note. I hadn't thought about it that way, but give American Pharoah a chance at the first Grade 1 of what will no doubt be many of his career as a sire. There are some other interesting runners, at least for discussion purposes in here. Let's go down and talk about number 2, Secret Potion, a horse who was very well hyped heading into that first race, won by American Monarch. Can you see any reason for him to turn the tables on the horse we both like, the 5 American Monarch?
Well, I think especially if, let's say Ready to Repeat doesn't go in this spot, and you have Gretzky the Great, the one coming out of that race who ends up going here, I could see a scenario where he gets a similar pace situation to the one that he did at Saratoga in that career debut. Now you go second out of the box, you get a Lasix for the first time for Chad. I can see a scenario where if the pace is exceptionally moderate, there's a scenario where second time out, there's enough in the tank. We gained enough. I love how gamely the horse was in the stretch. I thought he didn't pack it in at all. I thought he fought on really, really well. I can see a scenario where maybe that's where you kind of turn the tables. I'm also, I don't know. What are your thoughts? How do you think they bet the race? Because there was a part of me that hoped that people would look at Chad Brown and say, oh, well, it's Chad in a grade 1 with a 2-year-old on turf. This one's the favorite. And I don't know that it's probably too early to make a definitive statement which one of the 2 horses coming out of that run from Saratoga on August the 8th is actually more talented. But I kind of believe it's the Mott horse as opposed to the Chad horse.
I feel like given the hands they're in, Chad Brown, known for bringing him to the race, is more fully formed, and Mott's known for coming on. Plus the fact that the market tends to, if anything, underrate maidens in stakes races, let alone grade 1s. I feel like Secret Potion has to be the bigger price of the 2. I can see why in this field Ernie Perry reached out and made Secret Potion as low as 3-1, but I think in reality he's going to be a bigger price than that. I could see the crowd really going for Gretzky the Great. We know how important speed figures are to making the market, and this one has a couple of fast numbers that I really think could be gravitated towards. I was originally hoping when I did this race after the draw without any lines that we might be getting 3-1, 7-2 on American Monarch. Probably the 5-2 morning line guess is a little bit better, but I still think that'll be enough to make at least a solid second choice. I think they're going to come for Gretzky the Great. And then a horse that I'm interested in discussing, who I think could take some money, is the 7 Dolder Grand. This is a horse who there was clearly some kind of story about first out, and the story may have just been cost $800,000 out of a 2-year-old in training sale to be bet to 8-5 back on August 23rd. But what interests me about this one, even and what gives me good hope for our pick American Monarch, even if Ready to Repeat goes in the other race, I think if you're costing $800 at the OBS April sale, 2-year-old in training, you've got speed. And for whatever reason, this one didn't show it on debut. But I think he's going to show a lot more speed second time out and hopefully be able to, create a situation that's going to set things up for American Monarch. But I also wouldn't be shocked if this one takes, just based on the hype that led the horse to being 8-5 first out. This is another horse I could see potentially being 5-1, 6-1 for the powerhouse Cassie barn, especially up at Woodbine. What do you make of Dolder Grand in this spot?
Well, and to your point, I mean, perhaps we're going to see some better early speed coming out of this one in the start on Sunday afternoon. You take a look at the first work coming out of that career debut, came right back on the grass and dropped 59 flat, or a bullet drill on the turf going 5 furlongs. So maybe you do get a little bit more early pace from this one. My short comment in my actual, sort of trip note was inoffensive. I didn't think it was good. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was just fine enough. And when I went through this race, looking at the horses coming from Saratoga, looking at a horse like Gretzky the Great, who I really loved everything about the Soar Freely until the very end when he popped to his left lead because there was no pace. And I thought he went and got that loose Wesley Ward horse who was on the lead. But Dolder Grand is the kind of horse that I wouldn't take anything less than sort of 10-1 in a spot like this, because I do think some of these other horses are very talented. But I can understand folks that want to say, look, there are reasons to be sort of inclined to go this direction.
It's going to be interesting to see what the crowd does. I felt for Ernie, the Woodbine Mile we talked about on the Saturday, the Summer on the Sunday, not easy races to make morning lines for, but unless they just go ape, American Monarch is the one for me in there. And I know Matt agrees, and with the run of form you're having, it makes me feel very good that I landed on the same one as you, as opposed to our little minor head-to-head situation we came up with in the Woodbine Mile.
It's one of those things where I look at this race and go, is it going to necessarily be a harbinger of things to come one way or the other? Who knows? It's probably too early to tell. But I do like the fact that you have these 2 horses coming from Saratoga who have already gone 2 turns, where many of these other horses, specifically the Woodbine-based horses, they won't go 2 turns until theoretically Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf time. And at a place like Keeneland, which I've made it clear I think is a little bit of a quirky turf course, I think that's something else to keep in mind when you're looking at those races. The horses who have proven themselves or have already gone 2 turns. It's something to always just keep in the back of your mind, even including the Europeans coming over here, because many of them are going straight miles. So it's just something to file away when you're looking at these races on Friday afternoon, Breeders' Cup Friday. The horses who have already, even if they haven't won going 2, they've run well going 2 turns. I think you want to give them a few extra bonus points.
I think it's a good tidbit. Let's turn our attention, Matt, to the other Grade 1 on Sunday's card. It's the Natalma 1 mile. We've got the fillies this time, these 2-year-olds looking to punch their tickets to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. And this is a spot where I was just so impressed with Lady Speitspear's first race. And I'm wishing she was maybe going to be a little bit more of a price, given that we have the proven stakes runners who ran so well in the prep for this. But Lady Speitspear, to me, is nothing but upside for Roger Atfield, the trainer who, like Bill Mott, I expect them to improve with their racing. What did you think was going to happen here? I
mean, Lady Speitspear was exceptional in that career debut, was up, setting a fast pace, not only drew off, but galloped out like an absolute machine. I thought all around it was an impressive effort. My only concern was that I feel like she is very much in sort of the same vein as a horse like Spites Sherrill, or Sherrill Spites, rather, where it's a situation where I feel like everyone kind of is on the same page, where visually there's really nothing to knock here, goes out for top flight connections, presumably connections who, as the distances get longer, as there's gained experience, the horses are only going to get better. I wonder if that 5-2 may even be a little bit of a dream. Maybe she ends up in that 8-5, 9-5 range when it's all said and done. But to your point, you've got the horses coming out of that stakes race, specifically Alda. I think she's really, really solid for Graham Motion. She's done nothing wrong in 3 lifetime starts. I'm not going to hold the career debut against her going 5/8 of a mile, probably too short. Now we get sort of the test, the stretch out in distance. And for right, wrong, or indifferent, I kind of default to the horses who I think the distance isn't going to really be the thing that gets them beat. Whether they're good enough or not, we'll find out. The horse to me that I really want to give the benefit of the doubt, despite the fact that some of her speed figures thus far pale in comparison to the big girls, is the horse down on the inside for Danny Gargan. I thought Stunning Princess's most recent run, I understand she didn't win. I thought it was an absolute gutsy effort. They were about a mile clear of the rest of the field. These 2 fillies threw it down the lane. You go back to the career debut. She showed big speed, got run down by Plum Alley, who looks like a really talented runner as well. The Lasix go on, and you get a turn back in distance. I feel like there are too many things that are too intriguing to me to pass up a price, which is probably going to be every bit of the double-digit odds on the morning line, to pass up a horse like Stunning Princess. She's probably the most interesting opinion I have of the weekend as far as prices are concerned. But I can understand anyone that looks at it and says, from a number standpoint, she not only is she too slow, she pales in comparison to the other girls in here. I can understand anyone that raises that as a red flag. She's got a bit to find on figures, no doubt about it. I'm curious what kind of a trip you think she's going to get. I was just concerned with several runners in here having better early pace figures, that she could maybe get a little bit cooked on the front end. Do you think she can step up and show more pace and stay on, or do you like the chance of them holding her up and trying to make one run in this spot? I'm more inclined to think that they're going to try to take back a little bit and let some of the stretch out sprinters go, simply because those stretch out sprinters are going to need to prove that they can handle the distance. And if she is willing to sit as well as she did off of just an absolute snail's pace in that most recent run up at Saratoga and still go on and commence a bid, I'd like to think that with a more honest pace in front of her, that's only going to sort of, I don't want to say boost her chances, but make her at least more intriguing. She's going to need to prove that she can do it, not only against winners, but away from Saratoga. She needs to win a race, period. But I think the slight turn back in distance, I think the Lasix for the first time, and if the trip works out the way that I hope it does, where some of the stretch outs go, maybe she tucks into the pocket and they just sort of bide their time and wait until they turn for home and that long stretch comes into play. I think she's the one who will be least affected by the long stretch as opposed to some of the other more likely, or let's say more talented runners at face value. I was going to ask you if the first Lasix factored into your opinion as a potential reason for her to bridge that gap between the figures she's been running and those of the top contenders. Sounds like it is something you're considering. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that you have to at least factor in a little bit. I don't know that it's going to move her up in a massive way. The thing that I found most difficult to really assess with Stunning Princess is there is such a large discrepancy in the two speed figures I typically use between the buyer speed figures and the Timeform US ratings. Timeform US has her basically, I mean, I'm just going to throw a number out there, with 15 lengths slower than some of these other girls. Like, she's not even in the same ballpark. But the buyer numbers, they at least give her a puncher's chance, especially if you think there's a scenario where she moves forward. I'm inclined to believe the buyers this time around, simply because, go back to the career debut, Plum Alley, based on the figures that these two girls earned in that first start, Plum Alley came back and earned something roughly in the same ballpark, and a couple of the also-rans came back and did the same thing. So I wonder if the figure that Timeform necessarily awarded to her in the most recent start, I wonder if that was a product of just an absolute walk on the front end, where it's very difficult to earn any kind of a fast figure. I think the buyer's probably a little bit more of a projection, and I actually think it's a more accurate projection at this point. But we'll find out, for better or for worse on Sunday.
We'll get another relevant data point, that's for sure. One long shot I wanted to mention here, we got a couple of crazy, strong female families. We talked about Lady Spitespear and the whose breeding is closely tied into Cheryl Spite we talked about before. How about Seasons from one of those great Phillips families, the dam being Winter Memories, who was such a favorite of mine and many other folks when she ran up here. Gosh, I don't know what that was. Was that 10 years ago now? I can remember when I did the bet-a-thon for an ADW back at the time. I bet as many races as I could in the span of 24 hours. And my biggest bet of the day was we had some strong word about this Phillips homebred who could run, called Winter Memories, who got the job done for us. But Seasons is another one of these horses who's way too slow on figures. But you see the way she was bet on debut. You see the way that she's bred. I'm not sure she's going to be able to win this race, but I might want a little bit of her on top, and definitely one I'd consider for verticals underneath, because I think it could very well play out to her running style. Part of what I like about Lady Spitespear is I think, she ran fast and she had the lead first out, but I also think she might have got lit up a little bit early in that race from that contact she had at the break. I'm hoping she can sit and not be part of a scrum up front. But if there is a pace duel with the likes of her and Dreaming of Drew and maybe Big Plans on the outside, that'll all the more potentially set it up for a horse like Seasons to come running and maybe grab at least a little piece. Did you give her any count at all?
Yeah, so honestly, I looked at Seasons and Sleek Lynx very much in the same sort of vein, where, to your point, they've got giant pedigrees based on both sides, top and bottom. A horse like Sleek Lynx, I believe the mare ended up winning the Canadian International a number of years ago. So clearly there's class there. They were both exceptionally green in their career debuts. And so much so that I think it cost Sleek Lynx at the top of the lane down at Gulfstream. She's about 1-9 to win the race, and instead she gets very goofy, swapping leads. She ends up not winning, but she's about 5 lengths clear of the rest of the field. I feel like they're two fillies who, if they put it together a little bit mentally second time out, they're giant players in here at big prices. It's just, I like enough of what I've seen from some of the shorter prices, as well as the filly that I like, to say, you know what? I mean, it's either I'm taking many of them or I've got to narrow it down, and I'm choosing to narrow it down. I don't know if that'll be the right call, when we look back on it on Sunday evening. But I think this is one of those races where if you were attacking some sort of a multi-race wager, I think this is one where you could probably spread pretty deep, because I think the talent runs deep, but there's a lot to prove from a maturation standpoint for a lot of these girls, in my opinion.
I like Lady Spitespear in the spot. Stunning Princess is your top pick. Sounds like, from what I'm just intuiting, if you had a second pick to give, it would probably be Alda. Before we finish this segment on the Talma, we'll very quickly recap the contest leaderboard, and then we'll get out of here today. But I did have one more question about this race. Was just asking you how you decided to separate number 2, Dreaming of Drew, and number 4, Dreaming of Drew, and number 5, Alda, because I was having a lot of trouble separating those two.
Well, Dreaming of Drew, I thought was just still a little bit. I'll be honest with you. I still think there's a little bit of greenness here, but the thing that really concerned me, and this is something that, who knows, she could prove me entirely wrong on Sunday. I hated that when the rail opened up about 3.5 paths wide, she didn't want to go through, and she eventually needed to angle out to come with her run.
That's a good point.
And it's it shouldn't necessarily be a make or break kind of piece for me, but it is, because if that opportunity presents itself on Sunday, I don't know that she's going to take it. Whereas a horse like Alda, I think, has been just rock solid and professional from jump. And I'm always going to lean a little bit more toward those types. I also think the way that Alda finished, I was more inclined to think that, this additional ground is going to be to her liking, maybe more so than Dreaming of Drew.
I like your case. And then looking at the specifics of this race, I think it's quite reasonable to assume that Alda will get the better trip again. I think I'll do some backups here with Alda. I appreciate your insight there, Matt. And on all these three win and you're in Breeders' Cup races this weekend, folks can check Matt out on NBCSN both Friday and Saturday. Who will you be on with? Who else is in the team this weekend?
I believe the crew is Todd Schrupp, Simon Bray, Christina Blacker, Brittany, and myself, and Jason Portondo.
Oh, fantastic. Jason was on the Racing Picks show with me and always does a great job. He's fantastic, as is the rest of that crew, all of whom we need to get back on these airwaves soon. Let's do a quick recap. It's 3 o'clock. Let's do just a quick recap of where we are in this contest, and then we'll go ahead and get out of here. We encourage folks to join us every week for these Horseplayer Happy Hours. If you follow Breeders' Cup on Twitter, if you follow me at Looms Boldly or Matt at Bernier_Matt, you'll get all the details. Hopefully you can join in, even if you do what Matt did this week and just end up playing all the fours. Who knows? It could end up being a successful strategy. You currently sit in 12th in a tie with our friend Shona Rosenblum, funny enough, who also played all the fours. I don't know if you gave her the number or she gave you the number, or if you just both like the fours. But that's where we go with that. But we'll run down the folks in the tie right now. It's going to be the top 6 entries who win their $179 into Saturday's BCBC qualifier. Of course, folks can just go right ahead and sign up for that one now. And here's our folks who've had the first 2 winners and sit in a tie with $29.30. It's Eric Counts, John Gasper, George Brugenthes, Don Marquard, Raymond Miller, Mike Samich, Togo Travalia, and Sam Stinson. All to play for here with 4 races left to go. I don't know, Matt. I love this 6-race format, harkening back to the old school pick 6, and of course also evocative of the 6-pack, perfect for happy hour. You think we should keep this format going for a little bit?
Yeah, because I think it's a good number of races. I understand some folks say, oh, well, now, if a big price comes in early, it's very difficult to dig out of that hole. Well, I hate to break it to you. It's the same way with the 10-race contest. If there's a big price that comes in that you didn't have early on, just that's the nature of the picking price. So I like the 6 races. Me personally, and I know we can't do it like this every week. It really depends on what the calendar looks like. I like it when it's at one track rather than trying to jump around, because then you get weird post drags and certain things get all jacked up. I like it when it's Belmont or it's Gulfstream or it's Laurel or it's whomever. But I recognize it can't always work out that way. So we do with what we have to work with and make the best of it. So I like these 6 races. I think it's a good little run. And Thursday or Friday, I think it's always good.
Yeah, it works out well if you're trying to do. I love it when we can be on air for the entire sequence. When that works out, God bless, and then I'm good doing 2 tracks. But if we're only going to be on for part of it anyway, to me, the 1 track does make a lot of sense. Speaking of which, I may do something crazy next week, and we'll announce it over on InTheMoneyPodcast.com. I may do an entire Stronach 5 live stream.
Wow.
Next Friday. That actually leads me to think maybe I should lobby to do our Horseplayer Happy Hour on Thursday, so I'm not just talking for 3.5 hours. But yeah, that's something I want to test out with our friends over at Sport of Kings, who are obviously a great relationship with the folks at Horse Tourneys and Horse Players. So I don't feel like I'm talking out of school mentioning that on these airwaves. But anyway, stay tuned. We'll give some information on that. We'll be back in this space next week. And with that, I think it's time to commence with the thank yous. And I'll start with you, Matt Bernier, for sharing your insights, giving us that nice winner in the first race. We'll be rooting for you and all the 4s to win your way into this qualifier on Saturday. We'll be watching you on NBCSN this weekend and following you on social media, listening to the Matt Bernier Show, especially now in this all-important run-up to the Breeders' Cup. And we'll thank our friends at the Breeders' Cup, especially Peter Rotundo Jr. Always a pleasure to deal with him, and so fun to be doing these Horseplayer Happy Hours. We'll thank DJ Unstable, producer Craig, doing a great job coming in, being flexible with our crazy schedule, cutting out the pieces to send around on social media, doing all those good things. We appreciate him very much. Most of all, though, and Matt, I know you agree with me on this, I want to thank all of the listeners and viewers for making these shows so much fun to do. Hit us up with some questions and comments to come back at next week. You can do that to us on Twitter or over at inthemoneypodcast.com. I've got a voicemail hotline number. We gotta get that back going again. I'll give that out maybe on the next show so we can hear some of these listeners and viewers as well. That's going to do it. This show's been a production of In the Money Media and the Breeders' Cup. Over at In the Money Media, our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.